Hop in, loser. We're going job hunting. Nina. Day 31. Have you noticed how busy it is at the guild today? Lucrute asked as we all sat at a table on the second floor of the guild together. The only people currently missing from our group were Peter and Mom, as they were downstairs collecting a job. The reason for this was because Mom wanted us to take harder jobs so that we could challenge ourselves, but she needed to be there with Peter as he picked before the receptionists would sign off on them. It actually felt nice to be doing a regular job again. Yeah. It's very strange. Dine replied as he looked over the railing near our table at the larger-than-usual activity of adventurers below. I reckon it's due to the Magicians Guild giving out free potions, among other things. You mean rumors of the Fox Princess? As I said this, it was hard to not just giggle at the topic of discussion sweeping across the city who was currently in line with Peter as they got a job for us. Most likely. That kind of news tends to cause a commotion. I'd guess that a few adventurers came here from outside the city because they believe news of a goddess in the city would also attract people, attracting jobs in turn. Give it a week or two. If the job boom doesn't occur by then they'll move off. Dine answered with a nod. Do you think that'll happen, a job boom, I mean? I wondered. Dine smirked at that. Well, there's been an uptick in requests to be escorted to the Great Lake of Tob. That says something. I found myself smirking at that, wonder how much she enjoys that happening? I pondered. She'd probably find it funny to see a bunch of people running off into the woods. Lucrute threw in, making me giggle. Though, I bet she'd hate having more busy work to do. You're probably right. I shrugged before adding, on the topic of jobs and requests, what do you think that Peter and Kasha are grabbing for us? Probably something that is different from the normal jobs we usually take. Else, they wouldn't be taking so long to acquire it. Dine replied with a thoughtful hum. It could also be that they are having an issue finding a job for us since there are so many adventurers in the guild today. I hoped that the second thought wasn't the case since that would be a sign of things to come. Namely, a glut of jobs. It was always worse for the copper plates since if there was a lack of jobs for the ranks higher than them, then said higher ranks would take jobs that were a rank lower. This caused a cascading effect that always left copper plates with the short end of the stick since there were only so many jobs that they could get. Much to my relief, Mom announced, "We're finally back with a job for all of you." As she and Peter walked over to us. What did you get? Lucrute asked quickly. Mom gave an amused grin before looking over to Peter. I took the chance to notice how much those golden motes of mana were gathering around Mom's tails this morning. More specifically, they seemed to all be concentrating on what seemed to be a phantom tail of gold. I had kept an eye on how those golden motes had been concentrating for multiple days now, and they seemed to constantly keep increasing. At this point, I didn't know if Mom's strange phantom limb was going to explode in a burst of mana or something else. All I did know from my study of magic is that extreme concentrations of mana like that typically meant that a spell of great power was about to be performed or something was on the verge of exploding. Sometimes even both. Why don't you go ahead and tell the group? Mom prompted our leader, pulling me away from my thoughts. Peter smirked in response before nodding in agreement, since all of us have been doing that training to strengthen ourselves. Kasha and I thought that it would be reasonable for us to attempt taking on a job to promote ourselves. As Peter said this, we all found ourselves in various states of surprise since this was unexpected. What? We asked together. Peter chuckled before answering, "Trust me when I say that I was just as surprised as you guys are when Kasha told me this." Mom then spoke up, "To loop you all in, I spoke with Pluton before the rest of you came in this morning about the training I've been putting all of you through. I also alluded to him that I felt all of you were at the point where you should be able to take a promotional exam to the gold plate rank. And he agreed, just like that?" Dine questioned. "Well, I am an adamantite plate. I have a slight bit of leeway when it comes to recommending that someone be promoted. And, as it stands, the four of you are definitely beyond the rank of silver plates at this point. Mom explained with a grin. While we had always planned to eventually become gold plates, that had been a distant goal. But considering how much stronger we've gotten since doing all that dungeon delving, it seems that today was the day. Then, what promotional exam are we taking? I quickly asked with excitement. Just along the road west of Rantel, there's been reports of a pack of barguests prowling the area that have been attacking merchants and travelers. Since we can't have that happen, your job will be to eliminate the pack to stop any further attacks. As Mom told us this, I considered what I knew of barguests. They were very similar to wolves, except they have horns and are wrapped in magical chains that they use to attack their prey. In addition to this, they are also said to be intelligent. This made hunting these creatures a dangerous task for weaker adventurers and required any who tried hunting them to be gold plate or higher. Interesting. Any reason as to why the barguests are coming out of the Great Forest of Tob? They typically don't do so. Dine asked curiously. No idea. That would be up to us to figure out. Peter answered. Lucrute smirked. Then it seems that we'll be in for a possible surprise. The archer remarked. You're in high spirits for what could turn out to be something dangerous, Dine said with an amused glance. We had to handle constant surprises that typically involved pitfalls or poisoned darts the past couple of days. The fact that we're not likely to suffer either of those two things puts me in a good mood. Lucrute reasoned, which I couldn't find myself arguing with. Yeah, I have to agree with Lucrute on this one. I spoke up, anything's better than the traps in that dungeon of horrors. Peter laughed at our musings. I'll take it that we're all in agreement on taking this mission. We all gave Peter our agreements. Good. Then the final important thing to note is that Kasha will not try to help us unless we need it, since she'll be acting as an observer for Guildmaster Einsak. All of us glanced to Mom, who looked unbothered. It's only reasonable that I mostly stay back and observe. If I got involved, then there wouldn't be anything left for the rest of you to fight. Mom explained. Fair enough. Can't let you hog all the spotlight, Lucrute teased. I won't argue on that front. Now, since you're all up for the challenge, we should get going since those barguests won't just hunt themselves. Mom replied with her hands on her hips. With that said, Lucrute, Dine, and I got up from our chairs before our entire group began walking towards the stairs. It was exciting to know that we'd be getting promoted once this job was completed. We were taking another step in advancing our careers. Baharuth Empire, Wilderness. On a horse-drawn cart was a group of 4 people chatting amongst themselves. So, Hecarim, think this job is going to be easy or difficult? A well-armored man asked. He had short blonde hair that was neatly styled along with a trimmed beard. Among the 4 people sitting on the cart, he was the most armored, with steel plate covering his body and a long white tabard with red symbols across it covering his armor. Strapped to the right side of a belt wrapped around his waist was a satchel, while the left side held a morning star. Considering that we're heading into the Great Forest of Tob, we're likely not going to have an easy time, Roberdike. Hecarim answered. The man had blonde hair that spiked up at the front, with a tuft of red hair on left side of his head. Compared to his companion, Hecarim barely looked armored, with only a brown and yellow tunic covering a white and red shirt. Yet, the faint noise of chainmail could be heard underneath his clothes whenever the cart hit a bump in the road. At both sides of Hecarim's waist were matching swords. At least we aren't the only team going into Tob. We've got 4 more teams behind us of adventurers and workers that help lessen the danger of entering the forest. A woman with purple hair tied in pigtails remarked while pointing to the 4 carts behind them. The woman was thin, without any curve on her form that gave her a slight androgynous appearance. She wore a mixture of light-colored cloth and brown leather as her armor, with most of the leather gathered around her left arm where she held her bow. What was especially unique about her appearance were the pair of long pointed ears, denoting her race as a half-elf. You're right, but it doesn't hurt to be wary about a job's difficulty. Especially when it involves some random structure that appeared within the forest near the lake. Hecarim replied. The woman gained a glum look at the mention of the lake, This better not involve swimming because I refuse to do so. You need to get over your problem with water sooner or later, Imina. A girl with short blonde hair and the youngest of the group at 16, stated. It might become detrimental to you in the future. In comparison to the rest, she was the least armored as she wore a pink tunic with a small leather plate over her chest that also helped to hold her dark cloak up. Leaned against her shoulder was a staff of dark metal. You can try everything you want to convince me otherwise, Arch, but I'm still not going to swim. Never again after that job, Imina said with a shiver. Hecarim put a hand on the half-elf's shoulder in reassurance. Cheer up, Imina. Arch is just trying to help you out. As Hecarim said this, Imina rolled her eyes and crossed her arms across her chest. Still not changing my mind, no matter how often the rest of you attempt to do so. Imina resolutely stated. Fine, we'll leave it be. Hecarim conceded before switching subjects. Hopefully, this place will have a lot of treasure. That would make this payday even better. Yeah, that'd make up for the fact that this place is near a lake, Imina agreed. I'll send out my prayers to the gods that it's so, Roberdike said while holding the cross symbol of his necklace. Each of the 4 points was meant to represent one of the 4 great gods. The jewel in the center symbolized their unity. I'd welcome a windfall of treasure right now. It would get me so much closer to paying off my family's debts, Arch said with a hopeful smile. The rest of the group looked at Arch and gave her a nod of sympathy. Arch's family were once nobles until Emperor Jerkniv's rise to power. After that occurred, they were one of the multiple noble families stripped of their status and properties. Yet, her parents continued to frivolously waste money to maintain the charade of their former riches. Even destitute, her parents borrowed money that they could never afford to pay back. It was bad enough that Arch had to cancel her studies at the Empire's Magic Academy to become a worker in order to take care of her family's financial issues. Ordinarily, Arch would have left her parents in the ever-growing hole that they dug themselves into, but that would also mean leaving her younger sisters behind to be dragged down with her parents. And so, Arch continued trying to pay the debts that they accrued so that she could protect her sisters. The young mage had little doubt that her parents might be willing to sell off her sisters in a marriage if it would get them more money. Not to worry, Arch. Even if the treasure turns out to be a bust, there's still the initial reward we're getting for traveling to this structure to investigate. 15 gold for each of us is pretty good. Roberdike reminded the girl in order to distract her from her worries. Yeah, that is helpful, Arch agreed. But this does make me wonder why our client is paying so much for this job. With all the groups behind us being paid 15 gold per member, that's a lot of coin being thrown around. Hecarim shook his head at the question. The guy who hired us was some middleman to our actual client. At least, that's what I'm inclined to believe. Either this is some powerful noble who doesn't want their name to attract the wrong sort of worker or adventurer, or this is someone who needs to keep their identity hidden. Best not to ask as long as their information is correct and the pay is good. It's still quite curious. Makes you wonder what is so special about this structure that the client is willing to spend this much money for it. Imina questioned. Maybe it's magical? That or the gods just dumped a structure out into the woods for no discernible reason? Hecarim chuckled as he looked over to Roberdike. No offense, Rob. Roberdike, a paladin of the 4 great gods, took the jest in good humor with a chuckle. None taken, Hecarim. I'd be amazed if that were the case. We've got a few more days to speculate, at least. Imina offered. That we do. Hecarim replied. Naya. Day 32. I found my consciousness coming back to me as my eyes slowly began to open. Then, I felt pain from my left eye at the attempt and my hand went to feel it, except there was a strange cloth, almost like a feather, tied over my left eye. Best to not touch, one-eyed girl. Feather of mine, over poultice found, helps to heal the eye now gone. The voice said with a vibrating hum to its melodic voice. Yet, my remaining eye widened as the events of yesterday came back to me. The red tree my squad found made of blood-red wood and living bodies. the horrid roots moving like terrible snakes as they ensnared each of my squad mates. The root that took my eye. The fate I almost shared until lightning struck down the attacking roots and a wall of feathers surrounded me. Quickly, I took note of my surroundings, which seemed to be the depths of a cave. There was a fire a few feet near me, lighting up the caving in constantly twisting shadows. Who are you? What happened? There was lightning, a wall of feathers, and then that was it. I questioned while weakly pushing myself into a sitting position. One-eyed girl asks a grand many questions, yet injured she be and rest she needs. This thoughtful one has some answers, but can half-sight fully see them? The voice replied with a hint of amusement, yet it still maintained that vibrating hum. Can you just tell me? I asked as I felt the urge to scratch at my missing eye, but restrained myself from doing so. But this thoughtful one has told one-eyed girl. Yet, not all are the mindful one. Forgive, thoughtful one hasn't spoken with many others in sound of throat and tongue in many growths of the tree. A quick vibrating hum was followed by a few clicks of what I assumed was the being's tongue. It almost seemed like it was testing out the movement and sound. Yes, thoughtful one understands, shall simplify, make easier. Hugin is the thought and thought is the Hugin. Some would say Odinson, but one of eye, thought, and mind is closer than one of loin. Hugin has spoken, what of one-eyed girl? Or is this one nameless, unknown, unthought? What sounded like the flapping of wings echoed behind me. Turning around, I couldn't spot whatever it was that made the noise. Additionally, moving that fast made me slightly nauseous and I was forced to stay still for a few moments before the nausea went down. Okay, Hugin, I said, getting a vibrating hum of acknowledgement from the being, my name's Naya Baraha. Ah, thanks for saving me. Welcome you are, Naya Baraha, one-eyed girl. One-eyed girl called for help. Father, Creator, Odin heard and Hugin came with lightning and the sky's rage. As Hugin said this, an imitated sound of thunder cracking filled the cave, yet it didn't deafen me. Hugin spirited you away from the tainted, monstrous, imitation, corpse tree of the world. Hugin said this with multiple angry clicks. But I never called out for help. At least, I didn't speak it, I said as I recalled the events of before. Naya Baraha, one-eyed girl, prayed for help. The one-eyed god, Father, Creator, Odin heard your plea. My eye widened and my jaw dropped as Hugin announced that a god was the one to help me. Then, a dark form, larger than I was, grew in my peripheral vision. I looked over and found myself jumping closer to the fire as I saw what looked to be a large raven the size of a man, with dark feathers and a right eye of electric blue and a pitch-black left eye both looking at me with its head cocked. I was unable to hide the shout that escaped my lips. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the feathers around the throat of the giant raven began moving before a caw-caw-caw came from its beak. It did this for a few more moments before I guessed that the giant bird was laughing at me. One-eyed girl scared of Hugin? Sighs perhaps? One-eyed girl should not worry for Father, Creator, Odin wishes you safe, wishes you well. Hugin does the same. It was strange to watch the raven's beak move and human speech to escape. But this was truly Hugin. He was not a human, not a demi-human, and I doubted that he was truly a raven. Or at least, what a normal raven should be. What reason would a god have to save me? I've never even heard of this Odin before today. Why would he want me saved compared to a paladin like Frankus? I'm just a squire, absolutely nothing unlike him. Saying this, I thought about why someone would save a one-eyed girl like me. I'm average with a bow, just like I'm average with a blade. Frankus, on the other hand, was a devout man who was skilled with his mace. People liked him while I was seen with suspicion and dislike due to my eyes. Well, I now. One-eyed girl was the only one to ask for help. Father, Creator, Odin chose the one-eyed girl because she prayed, not to any of the four gods her people do, but to any god. Nothing you may be now, but nothing is not what you must remain. The one-eyed god chose the one-eyed girl. And, perhaps, the one-eyed girl might choose the one-eyed god? Hugin's feathers ruffled after he said this, and a throaty hum filled the cave. A god chose me. Out of everyone else, a god chose me, the squire with the ugly gaze. Who is Odin? I asked. Hugin made a slight hop over to me before sitting down next to me. Father, creator, Odin is the one-eyed god, leader of the Aesir gods, brother of the trickster god, Loki. Father, creator, Odin gave up his eye to the world tree, Yggdrasil, so that he may have knowledge and understanding of the realms. From his eye that he split in twain, the thoughtful one, Hugin, the mindful one, Munin were born. My other and Hugin both travel the realms so that Father, creator, Odin can see. Hugin then leaned in close to me with an electric blue eye that studied me. As it did so, I came to the sudden realization that Hugin wasn't the only one looking at me within those ancient blue depths. The gaze of a god was also fixed upon me. All of that ancient wisdom, all of that power. I could just feel it. He is watching me? I found myself asking. Yes. He sees the one-eyed girl that could carry his voice and vision. But what will the one-eyed girl, Naya Baraha, choose? With Hugin asking this, I thought about it. An actual god wanted me. Unlike so many other priests, clerics, and paladins who said that the gods spoke to them in mysterious ways, Odin was being direct with his messenger. He wanted me. Could you tell me more about him? I asked hesitantly, earning a set of clicks from Hugin. One-eyed girl, Naya Baraha, is inquisitive. Questions, thirst for answers, a mind open to listen. Father, creator, Odin likes this. So too, does Hugin. So, listen to this thoughtful one and hear Hugin speak of gods. Lucrut. We'd traveled for over a day along the road leading from Rantel to Pespel. The first night, we set up camp and took up shifts to stay awake. There were 2 reasons for this. The first reason was because Kasia said she'd be giving us very limited help, so any normal protections we'd usually have wouldn't react unless it was life or death. The second reason is because barguests are smart. They would prowl about and wait for travelers to be at the most vulnerable before striking. And they would always know when the best time to strike would be. It was what made them a terrifying monster to fight. I remember years ago the times my father would talk about his adventures when he was younger. Yet, one of the most terrifying adventures was the time he had to survive against a pack of barguests. Originally, he was part of a hunting party that was sent to deal with what was thought to be a pack of wolves killing the village sheep. There were 12 of them at the time. The night after a few more animals had been killed and eaten, Dad and the 11 others started tracking the paw prints in the dirt. The paw prints seemed slightly larger than usual, but nothing to be too bothered by. The tracks seemed to lead around a large area until Dad and the group tracked the pack into the forest. By that point, Dad and the others had spent almost a day hunting these wolves and the sun was beginning to dip. So, they set up camp for the night in cheerful spirits that they'd find the den of these wolves the next day. They had a fire lit and 2 of them would stay on watch for a few hours before switching off. For the first 2 shifts, nothing happened. On the third, the one my dad was woken up for, the other man on shift quickly screamed before getting dragged off into the woods. In the midst of Dad and the other watchmen trying to wake up the others, 2 more were dragged off from within their tents. The barguests went unseen as they hid behind the shadows the tents made before using chains to drag off another prize. It was after losing 5 people that Dad and the others lit their own tents on fire to fill the entire area with light and create a fiery barrier from the monstrous wolves. They kept their backs to the original fire pit and spent the rest of the night awake, holding off the barguests that prowled around them, just waiting for a moment that they might falter. Thankfully, that didn't happen and the 7 hunters held the barguests off until the sun began to rise. With the cover of night disappearing, the monsters ran off back to the woods, satisfied with their haul. Dad told me that it was the most terrifying night of his life. I completely believed him as his eyes always held that look of terror whenever he spoke of that night. With how terrifying Dad made the creatures out to be, I did some reading on barguests and their behaviors. This was mostly so that I could know if I was dealing with one and could avoid it. Funny that the knowledge I used to avoid them would now be helpful when trying to hunt a group of them. Last night, we didn't have any issue with nighttime assaults. So, we had our breakfast, packed up our tents and gear, and headed off down the road once more. It wasn't even the afternoon when we found the first signs of our prey. A toppled wagon with the remains of a horse that had been torn apart by sharp teeth. As for the driver, they had been dragged off into the tall grass of the plains. Kasha, got a scent trail on the missing driver? I asked, which she nodded in answer. It splits into two directions before converging towards the copse over there. As Kasha said this, she pointed over to the ominous groupings of trees. That's all I'll give you for right now. The planning and hunting of this Barghest pack is up to you. Fair enough, Peter agreed. Then, he turned to the rest of us. How much do we know about Barghests beyond just their overall threat and abilities? This was something that I could easily answer. Barghests are nocturnal hunters that utilize their dark coloring to blend in with the night. This results in them being prone to ambush hunting in addition to whatever hunting tactics their packs already use. Peter looked into the sky after I said this to judge the time before looking back down to us. We've got a long while before the sun goes down. Right now is the best time to strike. The only problem is trying to attack these ambush predators while they are hiding in within the copse. Dine remarked, it would be foolish to charge in recklessly. I couldn't help but smirk. Well, it would certainly be hard for these Barghests to ambush us if they don't have anywhere to hide. We've got a capable mage who knows some fire spells. Saying this, I patted Nina on the shoulder, causing our mage to blush at the compliment. Sounds like the start of a plan. After coming up with our plan, I scouted out the size of the copse by walking outside its perimeter to get a good judge of the distance that I would need to shoot my arrows. As it happened, this would be a simple enough shot to make. Once I finished circling around, I met back up with the others and pulled out a few arrows. How's it look for you, Lucrute? Peter asked. I gave him a confident grin in reply. Planner will work since I can make the shots from here, I answered. We came up with a few plans before our assault on the Barghests. Plan A is to light a few of my arrows with Nina's fire spells before firing them at different points of the copse so that the spreading fire would drive the Barghests to us. But this was only if it was possible for me to land the shots. Plan B was to have Peter, Nina, and I light fires at the different points and circle around to meet up with Dine. Knocking an arrow onto my bow before drawing the string back, I gave Nina a nod and she lit the tip of my arrow with that blue flame of foxfire. Then, I let the arrow loose over the copse before knocking another one and repeating the process. As Nina and I were working on drawing the monsters out, Dine went to work growing walls of roots and vines that would funnel the Barghests into a killing zone. Peter took point during this with his flaming sword brandished in preparation. Once Dine finished his word, the druid joined Peter with his plant-like mace hefted at the ready. A circle of magic grew at the tip of Nina's staff and I grew a root arrow from my hand before knocking it onto my bow. It took only a few minutes before fire was fully consuming the copse and monstrous howls echoed from within. Get ready, Peter warned as the beasts burst out from the bushes and trees of the copse with looks of anger directed at us. The Barghests looked like large wolves with dark grey fur, which was the only similarity in appearance that they shared. Unlike wolves, the Barghests had a short set of horns at the top of their heads, just between the ears. Chains of dark metal wrapped around their bodies, moving as if possessed. And then, there were the eyes. Ghostly blue filled with an animalistic intelligence. Nina shot a ball of blue flame out at a Barghest, fully igniting it in azure flames as it yelped in pain. I followed it up by hitting another Barghest with my root arrow, making spiked roots explode out from it before stabbing into two others of the pack and pulling them into the first. Growing another arrow, I shot another approaching Barghest, yet this time I didn't take any others with it as the Barghests spread themselves apart from one another, learning from what they saw happen to the three other beasts. Nina took out another and I readied another arrow. In moments, another Barghest was down, yet four more of the pack were still alive as they charged at Dine and Peter. two split off to attack Peter, who ducked under a chain being whipped at his head before jerking to the side as another chain tried to wrap around him. With sudden retaliation, fire burst from Peter's sword as he slashed down on the outstretched chain, cutting it in half. A howl of pain came from the second Barghest at its injury as the piece of separated chain flopped a few times on the ground like a fish before becoming still. The second Barghest jumped away from Peter while the first attempted to leap at Peter's throat with its maw wide open. This was the last mistake the beast ever made as Peter, with practiced ease from our training, stabbed his sword forwards and let the beast's momentum allow it to be impaled from its jaws and down into the rest of its body. As the second Barghest was distracted by its packmate's death, Nina lit it ablaze in more blue flame. Looking over to Dine, I saw him smash his mace into a charging Barghest while its partner was rooted to the ground by plants and roots conjured by Dine. With ease Dine battered the attacking Barghest as the other tried biting at the roots holding it in place. With a smirk, I readied another arrow and let it loose, killing the creature in an instant as Dine ended the other with a sickening crunch to its skull. It was good to note that none of us seemed winded from this fight. It meant that our training was clearly paying off. But before we had any time to relax, a singular howl, louder than all the others, came from the woods as what appeared to be another Barghest erupted from the burning trees. This one was much different from the other beasts that we fought. For one, it stood twice as large as any of its packmates, towering over all of us. For another, whereas the other Barghests had a singular coil of chain wrapped around their bodies, this creature had multiple that hung around it like snakes preparing to strike. The horns of this creature more so resembled those of a stag's in length compared to the short horns of the others. And finally, the eyes of this creature glowed a complete blue, yet it was undeniable to see how angry these eyes were. It met the gaze of each of us. Even Kasha wasn't exempt from its hatred. This is a greater Barghest. I alerted the others. Of what I can recall about greater Barghests, they come about after a normal Barghest lives for more than 20 years and acquires the chains of other Barghests it defeats. Anything we should be aware about it in comparison to the normal lot? Peter quickly asked as the beast continued to study us, planning its next attack. Not much besides the fact that they're stronger and have greater magical control over their chains than normal Barghests. Of said abilities, I'm not sure, so we need to be careful. I answered before drawing back another root arrow and firing it at the beast's eye. Much to my surprise, a chain lashed out and caught the arrow in the air before tossing it aside. A howl came from the greater Barghest in challenge to us before it started a charge. Nina and I loosed arrow and spell alike to deal some damage, but each arrow was slapped aside while Nina's bolts of fire were blocked by the chains, turning them molten red. Dine joined in as he cast a spell, Twine Plant. Roots and vines came from the ground to try and entangle the greater Barghest, and it was delaying the beast. The only issue is that it wouldn't hold for long because those chains of it were tearing at the ground and plants to free itself. Peter took this moment to charge the beast while it was held. Yet, as it swung a chain at his head, and it was all Peter could do to duck under the chain as it cracked over his head like a whip. I had no doubt that it would have killed Peter if it made contact. Nina cast more bolts of foxfire, but the beast continued to block. Each time, the chain would become molten red before it used a different section of chain. Yet, my eyes followed those weakened chain links and I smirked as an idea came to mind. Dine, keep holding it down while I drag its focus. Peter told Dine as he dodged a second whip of chain and parried a third away with his blade. Got it. Dine replied as he continually reinforced his first twine plant with more castings of the spell. As that happened, I readied a normal arrow and followed the movements of the brightly lit sections of chain. Just as the creature's attention was pulled by Nina launching another bolt of flame, I shot my arrow at a weakened section of chain and smiled as hit the mark and broke through that weakened chain, causing a large length of it to fall to the ground with a few weak movements. The greater Barghest howled in pain as its attention turned to me. Hope you like that, you damn mutt. Upon hearing my taunt, the Barghest snarled at me, which was all the distraction needed for two things to happen. Nina's Foxfire directly impacted the greater barghest around the eye, destroying the eye and burning away the fur, flesh, and some of the bone around the area. This earned another cry of pain from the beast before Peter charged in and sliced through its trapped left front leg with his blade. Not expecting this attack, nor the loss of its limb, the greater barghest lost its balance and toppled over, giving Dine the chance to swing his mace at the beast, causing a mass of roots to burst from the mace and slam into its face. Keeping up the tempo, I fired a root arrow at its remaining eye while Nina launched another bolt of Foxfire at its ruined one. Both our attacks hit at the same time, with my root arrow expanding into a mass of sharpened roots that burst from its head in different directions while Nina's flame lit said roots alight. The greater barghest didn't even have the chance to whimper before dropping to the ground dead. Before we could celebrate too earlier, we looked back to the burning copse a little longer in case any more barghests had been hiding inside. It was only after we confirmed no more of the pack remained that we began celebrating. "We did it," Nina shouted with both her hands raised above her head. "Hell yeah," I agreed as I rushed over to the young mage and picked her up before throwing her over my shoulder and spinning us in circles. Nina wasn't even bothered as she began laughing. I didn't get long spinning Nina as Peter and Dine tackled us into an embrace. "We're gonna be gold plates," Peter exclaimed. "No more terrible jobs," Dine joked as we all began laughing in our pile. We were finally going to be gold plates. All of the hard work we've been doing has paid off. In the midst of our celebration, Kasha walked over to with a warm smile on her face before crouching down to meet us. "Congrats on winning this fight without my assistance. You guys have definitely earned that promotion when you get back," my beautiful fox said with a proud tone. "And what are you doing outside this celebration pile? You're one of the direct reasons that we can celebrate in the first place." As I said this, I grabbed her by the hand and pulled her to the ground with us, earning a surprised yelp followed by a laugh. Kasha. Following the impromptu celebration, we eventually got off the ground and began to harvest horns from the barghests as proof to the guild of the job's completion. In addition to this, we also took the chains of the beasts with us as well. From what I was told, due to the inherently magical properties of the chains, blacksmiths paid good money for acquiring them. That was certainly an interesting train of these creatures, especially because I've never seen them in Yggdrasil. That'd make them a species unique to this world. Though, I couldn't figure out if the chains surrounding their bodies was something they were born with, something they conjured with magic, or some other process that I just couldn't identify. Oddly, in the middle of breaking off another set of horns for the team, I faintly heard the noise of many different voices all at once before I felt a sharp itching pain coming from my tailbone. It was enough to make me stop and hiss in pain before I felt good enough to start moving again. What the hell was that? Looking around, I saw that no one else had noticed my momentary weakness as they were busy harvesting the corpses. Taking a deep breath, I rubbed the painful area of my tailbone and wondered if this happened because of my constant use of Kitsune illusion. Maybe it did have side effects of using it for too long? Then again, if that were the case, then I'd probably have experienced them a lot sooner than this. I'd have to look into this a bit later. Right now, it was a time for the group to celebrate. I'd figure out what the problem was when we got back to the city. "Everyone finished collecting everything from the barghests?" Peter asked us as he stood up from the beast he'd been working on. "Yeah. I'm done over here," Dine responded as he got up, shoving the horns into a small bag at his hip. "Same," Nina said quickly as put her horns into one of the pouches on her outfit. Lucrute gave a grunt of affirmation as he chopped off the last horn on the barghest he'd been working on. "Just a moment," I said, taking another breath and standing up, thankful that there wasn't any lingering pain from earlier. Then, I turned to the others and gave them a large grin. "Ready to go." Taking a glance at the copse that was now just smoldering wood at this point, I was happy to note that the fire hadn't spread any further. Part of this was due to me drenching the nearby grass in a water spell to prevent any wildfires. The rest is because there wasn't that much tall grass near the copse. With everything to my satisfaction, I walked over and joined the others before we all began walking back towards the road to Rantel. So, since we're now Barghest Slayers, what do you think would be the next tier up from that? Lucrute joked as we walked. Troll Slayers? Giant Spider Slayers? Not sure on that end. Dine answered back, earning a snort from Peter. Giant Rats. Peter added. Hold on now, Lucrute said while putting his hands between himself and Peter, we can't start going crazy now. Giant rats are too powerful for any mere mortal to face. Nina smirked and nodded at this, playing along. Yes, you're right, Lucrute. We obviously need to employ the services of a giant cat to rid the world of such foes. Nina reasoned, earning laughs from the rest of us. At least, it did for the others. Mid-laugh, I felt another itching pain at my tailbone followed by some more distant whispering that I still couldn't make out, but was louder than last time. I tried to hide my issue with a grin, but it seemed like my daughter noticed something was off with me. This resulted in her discreetly moving over to my side before she whispered to me, "Is everything okay, Mom? You seem off." Tousling her hair in reassurance, I gave her a nod. "I'm good, kiddo. Everything's fine," I replied. Yet, Nina didn't seem fully convinced. "Okay, Mom. I'm just making sure," Nina said with a soft smile in return. I gave her a one-armed hug in reply. Enough about me. How do you feel now that you'll be returning to Rantel with a promotion waiting for you? I asked. That seemed to do it as Nina lost that concerned look and her face became filled with excitement. "I can't wait. We've been working on ranking up in the guild, but we always thought that it would be a few more years before we'd be strong enough to do so," Nina explained as she looked ahead of us towards the others, but now that we've made this much progress in such a short amount of time, she looked back up at me with a massive grin. "I think that we'll definitely be able to become platinum plates within a year. And I'll be there to help you out, cheer you on the entire time," I promised. I wouldn't want it any other way. Naya. Hugin and I had spent a long time talking with one another. He had spoken so much about the god Odin, and it still felt slightly unreal to me. And yet, the proof of it was sitting right in front of me, staring at me with that ancient gaze that just seemed to blanket me in power. "You're saying that this world is just another realm of the world tree, Yggdrasil, but also that it isn't? How does that even work?" I asked as we had moved on from the topic covering Odin specifically, and towards the land that he comes from. From what I understood, Odin and his fellow gods all lived spread out on realms connected to each other by a giant entity called Yggdrasil. There were 9 realms in totals, each one completely unique from one another, yet still connected. And then, Hugin claimed that this world was a 10th realm that wasn't an original realm of Yggdrasil. It confused me and didn't make sense. One-Eyed Girl's question is simple, answers to it are many. Explaining it converges upon the demigoddess arrival. Hugin has explored much of this realm, visited by others Yggdrasil-born. Unlike others, demigoddess of the fox acted as a beacon, called to hear the divine and ancient. Father, creator, Odin called here, he be, for demigoddess of the fox carried the staff claimed, rested, taken from father, creator, Odin. As Hugin said this, I felt like he had only opened up more things for me to question. A demigoddess of the fox stole a star from Odin, bringing his attention here? And that was just what brought Odin's attention here? I asked, piecing together what the giant raven said. Hugin made a clicking from his beak before nodding. Indeed, yes, correct, One-Eyed Girl. Demigoddess of the fox, Kasha Blanc, daughter of fox mother goddess Inori. Called Mother Fox with her presence, like she called the goddess war mother Freya, and father, creator, Odin's brother, trickster god Loki. Chosen of both, she is, possibility of drawing further gazes of other gods, likely as well. Hugin pecked his beak on the cave's floor, almost like he was trying to prove a point. Empty gods given prayer and belief in this world. Much power is left open to claim, much worship, yet only room for finite gods. Demigoddess of the fox and fox mother already claiming, but father, creator, Odin desires some as well. Yet, only a small aspect of his interest in this realm that isn't a realm of Yggdrasil. And is Odin an enemy to this fox demigoddess? Is that his reason for being interested in this realm aside from worship? I earned a shake from Hugin's head in answer. Annoyed by fox demigoddess for defeating his avatar, father, creator, Odin is. But defeated in combat the avatar was. No, father, creator, Odin has interest in this realm because the roots of the world tree, Yggdrasil, has sent a branch out to connect it. Yet, with this branch, something else has come, attached, entwined, hidden on the branch and acts the parasite. Seen its effect, One-Eyed Girl has, through the false tree, the copy, the bastardization of the world tree, Yggdrasil. The moment Hugin mentioned this, my lone eye widened in shock and horror. That crimson tree, covered in living bodies, was something that had hitched a ride to this land through the spreading of this world tree. It was like some sort of infection that was slowly growing. But what would that mean for the Roble Holy Kingdom? The Great Wall was less than 50 miles away from that monstrous tree. What is that red tree? Why is it here? I asked desperately. Hugin gave a warbling hum before answering, unsure. False tree, the copy, the bastardization has never appeared within the 9 realms before. Perhaps due to Ratatosk's influence or due to presence of many gods in the other realms. Can only assume it's ancient, yet need more, too little clues, too many possibilities. All can be done now is delay until Father, Creator, Odin gains enough worship to intervene. As Hugin said this, he leaned his eye towards me, and I understood what he was implying. More people need to worship Odin so that he can save us all. So that he can protect my country. Odin wants my help so that he can protect my home. He is a god that wants to save us all. To protect us from all threats while the rest of the 4 great gods sleep and do nothing. He saved me from a fate worse than death. From the false tree, the copy, the bastardization and more. Would the One-Eyed Girl choose the One-Eyed God like the One-Eyed God chose the One-Eyed Girl? Hugin asked me this, and I could feel the presence, his presence, watching through Hugin's electric blue eye. A god waited for my answer. He saved me, chose me, and wanted to protect my country. Why would anyone decline such altruism from a god? Especially when this god was real, almost tangible with his power. When had the 4 ever been like that? They threw scraps to my people in the form of the small miracles that could only delay the ongoing threat my kingdom faced. I was taught that they were supposed to be the protectors of humanity. If that was the case, then why were we always on the back foot? Why were we forced to perform immense labor to wall ourselves from danger when the 4 should have prevented that from happening in the first place? Why would they allow the monstrous tree to grow from just outside our borders without doing anything to stop it? Why should we bother to worship the 4 when they barely bothered to care about us? Either the 4 and their ilk didn't care about us or they were false and we prayed to empty ears, like Hugin was telling me. If that's the case, then shouldn't we send out our prayer and devotion to a god that was actually listening? Shouldn't we believe in Odin? I wanted to believe in him. And he was completely willing to believe in me. Odin believes in me. I asked Hugin, almost as if to confirm what I already knew. The large raven gave a nod, while his presence now felt tangible, and I could almost hear a voice in my ear whisper yes. I want to believe in him. If One-Eyed Girl wishes to become the One-Eyed God's voice and vision, then she will need to make a sacrifice as Father, Creator, Odin has. As Hugin said this, he gently brushed his beak against the covered hole of my missing eye. I gazed at the raven with confusion. But I don't have that eye anymore. How can I give what isn't there? I asked. You will never have it again, One-Eyed Girl. No spell, no prayer, neither the divine nor the damned shall ever return what the false tree has grabbed. Will the One-Eyed Girl forever live as Father, Creator, Odin does? As Hugin explained, I understood and gave him a nod. My eye is already gone. If it can save my country, then I'll gladly live with one eye for the rest of my life. The second the words left my lips, Hugin's electric blue eye glowed with a bright light as the presence surrounding me finally merged with my form as I closed my lone eye and let myself sink into this feeling of power submerging itself within my flesh. Hello, Naya Baraha. I am Odin the Allfather. You are the first of this realm to become my follower, offering your permanent sight in your left eye to become my voice and vision. As such, you have become more than Naya Baraha, squire of the Roble Holy Kingdom. You are so much greater. From this day forth, you are Naya Baraha, Odin's speaker. As I heard this old and kindly voice speak directly into my mind, I felt tears of what I guessed to be rapturous joy fall from my right eye. When I finally opened my eye, I saw the translucent form of an elderly man with a long white beard, long hair tied back by a leather band, an electric blue right eye, and a leather eye patch covering his left. He gave me a kind smile, and I knew that I was looking at Odin. For a god, he took on modest clothing. A simple blue robe over a grey tunic and trousers. His boots seemed well worn and travelled. Yet, the oddest part of his outfit was the cut-off noose that hung from his belt. Recalling what Hugin had told me, Odin had hung himself from the world tree for 7 days and 7 nights to learn of the realms. My lord, Odin, what do you wish for me to do? I asked, looking for guidance to my task. First, Naya Baraha, Odin's speaker, we walk together to your homeland. Then, we speak, both you and I. After that, we continue on. We have time, but it is not limitless. Our enemy, the false tree, will grow and spread as more beings become ensnared in its grasp. We have much work ahead of us and I have faith that you will be instrumental in its success. But for now, my voice and vision, you must rest and recover from the trial of yesterday. Tomorrow, we will begin our journey. Upon hearing this, Odin knelt next to me and placed a hand on my shoulder in comfort. Even with his ethereal form that wasn't truly there, I could still feel his hand through that presence of his. In that moment, I felt completely at ease and the troubles of the world seemed to just leave me. Then, he turned his gaze outside the cave towards the east. Is something the matter, my lord? I asked. He stared for a moment longer before turning back towards me and shaking his head. Nothing for you to be concerned about, my voice and vision. It is but a simple matter that I have seen happen before. It is not something that should impede our work. In fact, it might be a future boon to us. Kasha. We walked for a few more hours until the sun began to lower. After that, we stepped off the road and set up our camp by a small scattering of boulders. Once our spot was picked, the others began pulling their tents out and setting them up. Me? I could just cheat and create greater item, to spawn a tent for myself. Instead of setting up a tent, I busied myself with setting up a fire pit and warming up a large pot of stew that I had left in my storage for this trip. It was interesting to note that food stored in my storage space didn't go bad. It gave me the assumption that my storage space froze anything that entered it in some kind of timeless state. If I was ever exceedingly bored and had some time to kill, I might try testing out the limits of my storage space in this new world. Unfortunately, I was becoming more and more busy with all of the events that I was quickly becoming a part of. There were the remnants of 8 fingers which I've been sending my kitsune to destroy, besides the operations that Rena and I agreed would be left for her to eliminate. Though, as a precaution in case she wasn't able to, I had a few kitsune on guard at these operations with orders to destroy them if Rena was unable to. Speaking of the future queen of the Re-Esti's kingdom, Rena seemed like a nice enough girl, just isolated from people. Though, she and her little boyfriend, Climb, were absolutely adorable around each other. I'm a real sucker for romantic stories like theirs. It really made me root for the pair to have a happy ending as a couple with one another. I'll just have to do everything I can to ensure that this is the case. But aside from Climb, it seemed that Rena didn't have any real friends or people that she could get close to. I am hoping that the kitsune I assigned to protect and serve her might be able to get close enough to Rena to establish a friendship with the girl. Tsunami was quite kind and friendly, so it would help to aid in any friendship the pair might create. Though, personality aside, One thing that was slightly odd about the pink kitsune was how similar her wardrobe was to my goddess clothing, namely, the stripper dress. Maybe she's just a bit of an exhibitionist? Anyway, with how smart Rena was, she actually had come up with quite the plan to capitalize on subjugating 8 fingers, which would help to establish her competence in fixing the problems within the kingdom. This could then be leveraged to increase her claim to the throne. Other than that, she said that it was an ongoing plan to attain her queenhood, but she'd alert me if I needed to give her aid that was greater than what Tsunami could give her. I have no doubt that a smart girl like her would have little issue in attaining the throne. Frankly, the girl is a genius and has more skill in courtly politics and intrigue than I would ever have. I have complete faith that she can do this. Next on the docket was Zarasu, and oh boy, I enjoyed teasing the hell out of him. His first time being a diplomat to the other lizardman tribes, and he immediately gives a marriage proposal to the first pretty girl he sees. At least, I guessed she was pretty. I'm not exactly versed in the attractiveness of lizardmen males and females. I'm extremely interested to see how Zari embarrasses himself in front of Crush. Though I do hope that my friend is able to earn a happy ending with Crush. I just hope that he doesn't continue acting like a love-struck idiot around the woman. After stirring the stew within the pot enough times, as well as getting delicious-smelling steam wafting off of it, I spotted that Nina was the first to have her tent set up and was waiting patiently on a rock for the food to be ready. "Smells good," she commented. "You're telling me, kiddo. Just a moment and I'll bring some over for you," I answered with a grin. Scooping out a bowl of stew for Nina and myself, I stood up from the pot and was about to walk over to my daughter when a new barrage of voices began shouting in my mind. "Fox Princess, hear my pra/Lady Kasha, thank you fo/thanks for saving Daddy and /he gives gifts to those in /we pray to you." And on it went as a splitting pain went through my tailbone as my mind felt so crowded. It just wouldn't stop and only kept growing worse. The bowls fell from my hands as I collapsed to my knees. My body felt like it was burning up as sweat poured off me. "Mom!" !/Kasha. Nina and Lucrute screamed to me, attracting the attention of the others. It was getting so hard to concentrate on their voices as more kept crowding my mind. It didn't stop and I desperately wanted it to just cease. But it didn't. It kept going, and with the increased noise, so too, did the pain in my tailbone enter into agonizing levels. I found my illusion failing me, revealing my form, but I couldn't care about it at this point. I hugged myself and screamed as the pain took on a new crescendo, and I think that I was being held someone at this point, with the others talking, or was it shouting? To me. But that was barely a comfort as it felt like something was pushing itself out of my tailbone like a dull knife. My vision went white at this point and I let out one long agonized scream until a notification seemed to just fill my mind. "Fledgling Goddess, 1, acquired. Mom." I faintly heard Nina's voice. "Kasha. Wake up." I think I heard Lucrute say to me. Then, the world went dark and I knew no more. Divine growing pains. Lucrute. After setting up my tent, I found a smirk growing on my face at the thought of how little I've used this tent in the past 2 weeks. Though, all things considered, I was more than happy with the reason for why I hadn't been using my tent. Turning around, I saw said beautiful reason stirring up a pot of stew over the fire. It was a little amusing to contemplate that a powerful demigoddess like her could do something so mundane as setting up dinner for all of us. You'd think that she would just conjure up readied food with a magic spell or something similar. Instead, she just used what she considered to be storage magic to preserve meals for later. Looking on, I saw Nina quickly move over to sit on a rock as she waited for the stew to be ready. "Smells good," Nina commented. I began walking over to the fire pit while taking a sniff of the air. Our emerald mage wasn't lying since the delicious smell was making my mouth water. "You're telling me, kiddo. Just a moment and I'll bring some over for you," Kasha answered with a grin. Following this, she took out 2 bowls and made her way over to Nina before stopping mid-stride as her face seemed to scrunch up in pain. The bowls quickly dropped from her hands, the contents spilling against the grass, but I watched as Kasha fell to her knees and knew that something was horribly wrong. My heart thudded as I sprinted over. Mom! Kasha. Nina and I screamed together as I slid to the ground next to Kasha and Nina, ignoring the spilled food that now covered my trousers. Just as I was about to touch her, Kasha's body became outlined in a golden aura as her illusion broke, revealing her bestial features. Yet, where there were normally 9 golden tails waving behind her, I saw a new limb made of that same golden energy wildly flailing with the rest of her tails. "What's going on?" Peter shouted as he and Dine rushed over to us, unable to get closer without risk of being hit by Kasha's wild tails. We don't know," Nina said in fear. Something I fully shared with her. A moment later, Kasha hunched over and hugged herself before screaming in absolute agony. Nina and I had no idea what to do at this point, so I pulled her into an embrace and held her while Nina wrapped her arms around her mom in support. To my horror, I watched that limb of golden energy begin to grotesquely converge until it became a long string of golden bones that ended at a sharp tip. "Please be okay, Mom. Please be okay," Nina begged as those golden bones became encased in a layer of golden flesh that began flinging off droplets of golden blood everywhere. I felt multiple droplets hit my face, but I ignored it and kept holding onto Kasha. I came to the quick realization after seeing more raw flesh sheath the limb, that Kasha was growing a new tail. Her screaming took on new heights as veins, nerves, and more formed into place. I looked to see that Kasha's eyes were rolled back in her head so that only the whites were showing. "Please, whatever this was, just hurry up. You're going to be okay. It'll be over soon. Please be okay," I pleaded as I watched more layers of flesh cover the slowly forming tail. As the new tail formed more and more, the golden aura covering Kasha's body grew brighter until Nina and I were both pushed back by the golden aura's energy bursting. Even knocked back, my eyes remained fixed on Kasha's screaming form as a pink layer of flesh finally covered the raw golden tissue before a layer of golden fur quickly grew over it. As this happened, a golden pillar of light shot into the sky from Kasha that lasted for multiple agonizing seconds before fading away. Like a puppet with its strings cut, Kasha fell to the ground and simply lay there. "Mom," Nina cried out as she got up and rushed over to Kasha while I did the same. I joined Nina as she tried shaking her awake. Picking Kasha up before cradling her in my arms, I found myself terrified at how lifeless she seemed, with only her soft breathing giving any sign that she was still alive. "Kasha! Wake up," I cried as I gently shook her unresponsive form. Peter and Dine joined us on the ground and looked at our teammate with the same worry that Nina and I shared. "By the gods, what just happened?" Peter asked in astonished horror. "I don't know, but we have to help her," Nina said with a panicked tone as she took Kasha's hand into hers. "Then let me try," Dine said as he crouched by Kasha and cast a spell, Cure Wound. He said as a green wave of healing energy covered her form, yet it seemed to do nothing. "Is it working?" Peter asked nervously. Dine's brow scrunched as he tried a bit longer before he finally relented and ended the spell. With a disappointed shake of his head, Dine answered, "No, it's not working. Whatever it is that she's going through is beyond something that magical healing can fix. Or, at least, healing of my level." That only made me more worried. Then what can we do? I've got no idea what it means for her race to spontaneously grow an entirely new tail or if what she's going through is completely normal. I asked. "I don't have any idea on how to help Kasha right now, but what I do know is that we should move camp quickly." That pillar of light was high enough to be seen from miles around. As we don't know how long Kasha might be unconscious, we should leave before someone or something comes by to investigate. Peter recommended as he attempted to take charge of the situation. Looking down at Kasha's sleeping form, then back to Peter, I gave him a nod. "Yeah, that's for the best. We should hurry," I agreed before looking over to Nina sitting next to me, worriedly looking at her adoptive mom. "Nina," I gently called, getting the mage's attention as she turned her tear-streaked face to me, Keep an eye on Kasha in case anything changes while we pack up camp. Nina gave me a nod before going back to looking at Kasha. The others didn't question what I said as they knew, like I did, that Nina's mind was too preoccupied with what was happening to Kasha to do anything else. Gently laying my beautiful fox onto the ground, I got up and followed Peter and Dine to break down our tents and pack. As we did this, Peter asked, while glancing back to Nina called Kasha Mom. Are they? He gestured between the two, and I nodded. For all intents and purposes, Kasha has fully adopted both Nina and Tyre. I answered as I rolled up my tent up into a bundle which I strapped to my pack. With a wry smile, Peter remarked, "Damn, I'm happy for Nina, but I wish that this was a better moment to find out about it." How long did you know about the change in relationship between Nina and Kasha? Dine asked as he began packing up our rations. Probably a week or so. Easy to notice how they acted around each other. That, and Nina would call Kasha Mom every once in a while, which I overheard. I replied while quickly moving onto Nina's tent. Following this, I decided to change topics to the situation at hand. It's going to be a lot of work to move Kasha with just the four of us. She told me herself that she weighs over 400 pounds, and her new tail just adds to it. How are we going to carry her? Just as Peter looked like he was about to answer, another voice spoke up, one that I was terrifyingly familiar with. "You won't need to worry on that front. I'll carry the princess if it is needed." All of us spun around to see the large red fox with blue-streaked fur sitting by the fire pit. Each of his 7 tails waved behind him as his blue eyes gazed at Kasha with a mixture of worry and calm, almost like he'd seen such things happen before. "Pemu, is Mom going to be okay?" Nina asked, surprising me that she knew his name. The princess has undergone the process of attaining her new tail. Normally, such an event is not as horrifically painful as what the princess experienced. I can only assume that the extreme influx of power going through Her Highness due to her apotheosis and transformation of her entire body turned a relatively painless experience into something agonizing. When the kitsune said this, our jaws ended up dropping. "Apotheosis?" Dine asked. "You mean that Her Highness has ascended to become a full goddess? Because of this, Her Highness is at her most vulnerable and will likely still be unconscious for a while longer until her body fully adapts to the power and changes." Pemu finished for Dine. "How long could she be like this?" I asked. "A few days. Possibly a week. Aside from Her Majesty, Lady Inori, there has never been another to achieve the feat of acquiring 10 tails. In the meantime, we'll just have to guard Her Highness until she finally reawakens." Pemu quickly answered while pacing over to Kasha and Nina. "Aside from you and us, Pemu, is there anyone else that will be helping us to keep Kasha safe?" Peter questioned. "Her Highness only brought 4 of us on this mission, myself included. One of us has already sent a message to the others and reinforcements will arrive soon. It is unlikely that we would need such forces to keep Her Highness safe, but none of us will ever take chances with the princess's life on the line." "Okay, it's good to know that Kasha will be safe no matter what. While that didn't fully alleviate my worries, it did help some. Then we should get moving." No telling what may have been attracted by the golden pillar, Peter said, yet we all received a shake of Pemu's head in answer. "This area has been saturated in the princess's power. Even unintentionally, this place has been consecrated with her blood and power." We took a moment to examine the glowing golden blood on ourselves and spread around the camp from Kasha's growing tail violently thrashing about, spraying blood everywhere. Yet, as we continued to watch it, the blood seemed to slowly be absorbed into the stone and soil. "Her body will recover faster if left in the area than if she were to be taken out of it." Pemu finished, making me frown. "What would we do, then? People are going to be coming by within the day to investigate." Peter asked with concern as he set his pack down. "Kitsune are quite adept at illusion magic. And a few of us can build shelters quickly. Her Highness will be perfectly hidden and protected from all who may come, along with the rest of you." I really don't like the idea of us being sitting ducks, but if it helps Kasha to recover faster, then I'll agree to it, I said, considering our options. I'm not leaving Mom until she gets better, Nina stated without hesitation. If all of you think it's best to stay here for Kasha, then I won't argue against it. Dine added with a solemn nod. Seems we're all in agreement. Peter finished, what do you have in mind, Poemu? The red and blue kitsune seemed to smirk before looking to all of us. When my fellow kitsune are finished scouting the area for threats, we'll begin work on shelter. After that, we wait. Kasha. I found myself waking up from the ground with a start. I didn't know where I was, with the last thing I remember being the massive amount of pain I went through before collapsing at camp. Looking around, I knew that I was definitely not at the camp anymore. Or even the new world. Around me, as far as the eye could see, were meadows of silver grass that reflected the light of the golden sky covered in silver auroras. And beyond those skies, overlooking everything, was a silver sun. The only thing to break up this monotony of endless silver plains was a silver hill nearby. Something about this place seemed so familiar, yet distant to me. Like a far-off dream. Yet, how the hell did I even get here? Pushing myself to my feet, I noticed that my balance felt slightly off. Looking behind myself to see what was causing it, my eyes widened in shock as I spotted one of my tails that didn't belong. Namely, an entirely new tail added to my previous 9. I moved the new limb in front of myself and took the time to examine the new limb I had. It looked just like all the others, and taking the moment to touch it, felt like all the others, too. But moving from 9 tails to 10? From what I knew of Mom and all the things I've been told, having 10 made me uglies. Then, there was the alert that went through my mind before I finally passed out. The fledgling goddess, 1, class that I had attained, but that would mean that I have more than 100 levels. Holy shit, I managed to break the level cap. But at the same time, what was needed to level up beyond just the normal 100 levels of Yggdrasil? I know for a fact that I have not gained anywhere close to the amount of XP it would take to level up normally. Considering that this was a goddess class, could I have earned it from the worship that I've been receiving? And then, how does one quantify the amount of worship it would take to level up? This was going to be a lot of guesswork. And this still didn't consider if I had a level cap for these goddess levels. My thoughts were interrupted when my nose picked up a scent, a very familiar scent. It smelled of foxes, nature, and the warmth of home. Mom? Any other thoughts I might have had about my apotheosis was shunted to the side as I began following that smell towards the singular hill in this sea of silver. I started walking at first, but the closer I got, and the stronger the scent became, the faster my pace became while my heart thumped in a mixture of excitement and hope. That's Mom. There's no mistaking it, that's Mom. I was sprinting at this point up the hill, praying that this wasn't fake as I got closer and closer. My eyes were beginning to sting as the thoughts of possibly seeing Mom filled my mind. I don't know where I am or how I got here, but that didn't matter since Mom was here. Within a few more moments, I made it to the top of the hill and I felt my chest hitch as my throat tightened. A woman stood on top of the hill with pure white hair and glowing silver eyes. The years hadn't had any effect on her as she looked exactly the same as I remembered her. She wore a simple white kimono while her 10 white tails slowly flowed behind her. Mom looked at me with the motherly smile I remembered from my childhood. The smile that made me feel so safe and loved. Mom? I choked out as tears threatened to fall from my eyes. Hello, my little fox. I'm so happy to see you again. Mom answered. When she said this, I no longer felt like Kasha Blanc, the 28-year-old former demigoddess. I was brought back to being Kasha Smith, the 7-year-old little girl who lost her mom. My feet moved without thought towards Mom. Mama? I was running by now as tears fell from my eyes while Mom moved towards me. In seconds, I jumped into Mom's arms and wrapped her into a tight embrace with my arms and tails to make sure that I wouldn't lose her. Mama, I sobbed as she wrapped her arms and tails around me, filling me with that warmth and safety that I hadn't felt in over 21 years. At the same time, I could smell the salt of Mom's tears and hear her sniffling. "It's all right, my little fox. We're together again, my baby," Mom said in my ear, making me burst into more sobs as I remembered all those moments of her saying reassuring words to me. I missed you so much, Mama." I hiccuped out while closing my eyes and holding on to Mom with everything I had. "So did I, my little fox. But Mama is here now, and I will be here for as long as you want." As Mom said this, she began to stroke my hair and hum a familiar song while I just melted into her embrace. I've wanted this for so long, and here it was. We stayed like this for a long time, yet I loved every moment of it. We were together again. It took a while before I stopped sobbing and finally opened my eyes to look at Mom. She brushed some of my hair from my face and gently wiped the tears from my eyes. "I remember you being so much smaller last time we were like this, my little fox. And you were so much bigger, Mama," I answered back with a smile and a sniff. "In the eyes of a child, I would have been," Mom replied before taking on a look of melancholy. "I just wish that I could have been there for you and Seth when both of you needed me." Shaking my head to dispel whatever blame she felt, I said, "Dad and I never blamed you when you had to go. We missed you terribly." After saying this, Mom kissed my forehead and I felt the warmth of her essence shroud me like magic, and I felt so comfortable and loved from that act. "And I missed you so much. I missed being there as you grew up, I missed being there to tuck you into bed, and I missed being there whenever you needed a shoulder to cry on. Even if I could watch, that wasn't the same as physically being with you. But now that we're together again, my little fox, we'll have so much to catch up on," Mom said, making me immensely happy. "Then I have so much to tell you about, Mom," I replied while looking into her glowing silver eyes, almost entranced by those silver pools that I hadn't seen for so long. "I'm pretty certain that you've already met or knew of one of my 2 daughters, Nina." Mom gave me a bright smile and nodded. "Yes, I already met one of my grandbabies, and she's absolutely precious. I even gave her a blessing or 2 to aid her, with more on the way once I have enough power to perform greater feats in this new world." I giggled at this. "So, aside from the ability to cast Foxfire, since I know that Nina didn't learn it from me, you made her have rapid hair growth." I felt that my grandbaby should have the ability to cast Foxfire. As for the hair growth, she had such soft hair, and I wanted to play with more of it. "Your daughter didn't have many complaints about it, all things considered," Mom replied with a look of amusement. "And is that little blessing going to be permanent?" I asked. "No, not really," Mom answered before giving a mischievous giggle. "I didn't make that blessing permanent, so it'll fade away after a few centuries. 3 at the earliest." I gave Mom a roll of my eyes. "Mom, Nina is human. A few centuries to you are barely a blip while, for Nina, that's multiple lifetimes," I explained. "I guess you're right," Mom considered with a nod of agreement. At that point, both of us began laughing. Yet, that minute blessing of beauty is only a small taste of all the gifts I want to shower on my grandbabies. After saying this, Mom lowered both of us to the ground until we were both sitting, with me laying back into her as she continued stroking my hair. All 10 of my tails were entwined with hers, unwilling to let go. "You're really taking to being a grandmother with gusto, Mom," I commented as I felt my hair get released from the binder holding it into a ponytail. "Of course I would, my little fox, I am a goddess of fertility after all. There's nothing I'd love to see more than my little fox having a litter of her own." When Mom said this, I leaned my head back and met her gaze. "Are you telling me that you want more grandchildren?" I asked. "Yes. As my heir and daughter of a fertility goddess in addition to the chosen of another fertility goddess, I want you to have a lot of babies. 9 at the very least. Both Freya and I have talked a lot about it and we're in agreement on this." My eyes widened at hearing this. "You and Freya have been talking about me?" I asked, thinking about the absolute chaos 2 goddesses could get into when focused on one person, namely, me. Mom nodded with an excited smile. "Oh, yes. Freya comes by my realm every so often to talk. Both of us wish to see you live up to your duty of fertility sooner rather than later. Oh no, they are both conspiring together. I mean, I know that I plan to have children in the future, but isn't that a bit much all at once? Lucrute and I are both too busy to take care of babies at the moment. And then there's the number. But, Kasha, I remember hearing you tell me as a little girl that you wanted to have a big family. I'm fairly certain that hasn't changed as you became older. When Mom said this, I took a moment to think about it. Yeah, she's right. I did want to have a larger family when I was a child. Growing up, I would have loved to have multiple kids, but the difficult/almost impossible standard of living a child born on Earth would go through if they weren't one of the elites made such a thought inconceivable, if not completely selfish to subject another person to that. I was thinking 3 kids or so, but 9 wouldn't be so bad. Okay, Mom. I get it. When things slow down, and Lucrute and I feel comfortable, we'll work on it. But right now, I can't go a few months out of commission. I conceded to Mom. Mom stopped playing with my hair and quickly pulled me into a hug before nuzzling my cheek, an action I leaned into. I'm so happy to hear that my baby plans to give me more grandchildren to spoil. I loved every bit of being with Mom again, but even so, my bliss was marred by the questions that went through my mind. Mom, how did I get here? Where is here exactly? I asked. Mom stopped nuzzling my cheek and giggled. To quickly answer your second question, this is your true home. The realm of foxes, the place you should have been raised with your father at my side. I only wish that had been the case compared to the regrettable life you lived on Earth. I rested my head against hers. We might have struggled, but despite that, I didn't care as long as I had you and Dad with me, I consoled her. And because of that struggle, it made every moment I had with the two of you all the better. Thank you, my little fox, Mom said appreciatively before changing topics. As for how you came here, technically, your body is still in the new world. Your soul, on the other hand, came here the moment you ascended into becoming a goddess. As you are still weak in your divinity, you were only able to arrive here on the Silver Plains instead of further within. I took a moment to glance at my hands and think of how real they looked and felt. How did a soul have the ability to be so tangible? Wondering how you seem like a physical body instead of a disembodied spirit? Mom asked, earning a surprised nod from me at how she could tell. For most of my other spiritual visitors, I turn them corporeal with my power over this realm due to it being my domain. For you, due to your status as a goddess, you have to comprehend things from a more metaphysical side. You are a goddess, therefore, you make reality bend to your will. That will take some time getting used to, I remarked. Don't worry, my little fox. You'll get used to it eventually. But aside from your divinity bringing you here, your presence, along with that of the skeletal friend of yours, caused Yggdrasil to spread its branch out to connect with the new realm that its world items resided in. This made it much easier for you to come home to me. That made my eyes slightly widen. Wait, do you mean to say that there are now 10 realms of Yggdrasil instead of 9? I asked quickly. Yes, there are now 10. And with it, there will be a rush of the deities and other beings of the realms that will attempt to conquer this realm as their domain once they were to learn about it. You likely have a couple years for the new branch of Yggdrasil to grow enough to become fully noticeable, but when it does. Mom trailed off, making me concerned. Everyone will try and claim what they see as an unclaimed plot of land. An actual divinely mandated version of manifest destiny. I replied. Thankfully, you're well on your way to mantling the rule of this new realm as your domain. Once you have done so, none will be able to usurp your position. From what I've seen, this realm is very special to mantle. Mom explained while brushing my hair. Why do you say that? I asked. The new world worships empty gods that have acted as reservoirs of worship for an untold number of years. Any god or goddess who managed to usurp the positions of these empty gods would become one of the strongest entities in all of Yggdrasil. With that, I fully understood the situation that I was in. At the same time, I found myself wondering about something else. It sounds like you want me to acquire all that worship. But what about yourself? You've been a goddess for a hell of a lot longer than I have. Wouldn't it be better if you got most of it? While asking this, I felt Mom manipulating my hair with some gentle tugging, but I couldn't tell in what way. I already have much of what I need. Any excess power and worship I acquire from you would be more than enough. I want my little fox to have everything she needs in life and more. My baby princess will be a queen by the end of this, just like how you promised your follower a kingdom. I promise you an entire realm. It made me feel warm and loved to hear how Mom was willing to promise me an entire realm of Yggdrasil just to make me happy. In a way, I guess she was trying to make up for everything she couldn't give me as a child. Thank you, Mom, I said with closed eyes and a smile. You're welcome. Mom answered gently before she continued with whatever she was doing to my hair. I just enjoyed the closeness of the moment. Mom then lifted my hair up and I heard the click of the hair binder at the same time as my hair felt suspiciously heavier. Without opening my eyes, I asked, Mom, did you just pull a Nina on me? You inherited a trickster tendency from someone, and we both know that it was not from your father. Mom answered, making me open my eyes and conjure a mirror in front of us with a snap. Even without the mirror, the first thing I noticed was that the hair framing my face was now well past my chest in length. Sticking from the top of my head, behind my ears, was my hair in a high ponytail that had been braided down the length. Worryingly, I pulled out the braid from behind myself and saw that a few inches of it piled onto the ground. In other words, if my hair had been freed up, it'd be well past my ass at this point. Mom, how long will whatever you've done to my hair last? I asked with a deadpan gaze that met hers through the mirror. Consider it to be training. As a goddess, you'll need to know how to bestow and dispel blessings and curses. I'm certain that you'll figure it out. With an amused grin, Mom leaned into my ear and added, who knows, maybe you'll want to keep it instead of dispelling it. I could only sigh at this. Right, I said with a wry grin. Then, another though came to mind and I nervously asked, by the way, is Dad here as well? I'll leave that a surprise. Mom answered, making me fully hopeful as I turned in my lap to her. Please, Mom. Is Dad here? I begged her while holding her hands in mine. There's so much I have to say to him, so much I have to apologize for. I was on the verge of tears when Mom put both of her hands on either side of my face and rested her forehead against mine. Grow stronger, my little fox. Once you get strong enough, you'll see Seth again. I promise. That set me at ease as I pulled Mom into a hug once more. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, I cried to her as I felt her arms wrap around me. This was one of the happiest days I've had in my life, and I didn't want it to end. I would be able to see Dad again. Nina. Day 33. Since yesterday, I've barely left Mom's side after she fell unconscious. All I could think about was how horrible her screaming was as she grew that tail. Looking from Mom's sleeping face to the newest tail she acquired, I found it extremely hard to feel happy about it when Mom had to suffer, and now wasn't even awake to enjoy it. After a large group of kitsune arrived at camp, more than 20 of them, within the hour, they immediately got to work setting up shelter for us. It really was more of a temple than a shelter, considering that they went about conjuring stonework from the ground with architectural spells that I've never thought to have existed. When asked about it, Peremu had explained that due to this place being the location that Mom had ascended into a full goddess, it should be marked as a place of worship for her believers to flock to and pay homage. What this ended up as was a large and ornate temple of white stone that seemed like marble. Decorating the walls were stained glass windows depicting Mom wearing the goddess clothing that she donned in public, except now depictions had 10 tails instead of 9. Though, while the temple was impressive, what truly astounded me was the small pool of water that a small team of kitsune had managed to infinitely conjure from the ground. This pool was large enough to allow a person to comfortably submerge their entire body with room to spare. And the water of said pool? It was golden, just like the elixir the Order of the Fox Princesses. This pool, which was confirmed to infinitely fill itself by the kitsune, was an ever-flowing source of Mom's blood, essentially. I couldn't decide if I should be amazed or terrified of the fact. The rest of the team also shared my opinion on this. At the back of this temple was a large statue of Mom's fox form with 10 tails that faced the entrance, almost as if to welcome in any visitors. Yet, while the first floor of the quickly assembled temple seemed simple and open, behind the fox statue was an underground entrance to a set of rooms that we had been given leave to rest in. The rooms were quite nice and furnished with beds, tables, chairs, and torches lit with blue foxfire. Honestly, even though the beds were nice, Lucrute and I hadn't used the beds in either of the rooms as we stayed by Mom, waiting for her to wake up. But unlike how Lucrute could only see her as she was, that connection I had with her revealed the immense amounts of golden motes of mana that were being absorbed into her body from the surroundings. At the same time, I remembered that massive pulse of power I felt from Mom when her tail had finally fully grown. I couldn't really describe it in any other word than godly. And all of it had to do with those golden motes converging on her body. "How are you doing, Nina?" I looked over my shoulder to see Lucrute walking into the room and make his way over to me before taking a seat in the empty chair beside me. "I'm fine. Just worried," I answered. Lucrute rested his hand on my shoulder and gave me a reassuring smile. "Well, don't be. Our Kasha is tougher than a little setback like this. Soon enough, she'll wake up and be her usual self. Give or take the new tail that she now has." I found myself smirking at Lucrute's little joke. "Why, yeah. She'll probably love showing it off to us," I said back. At the same time, I kept my other thoughts hidden about another fear of mine. What if becoming a full goddess somehow changed Mom's personality? Made her a different person? "Think things are going to change after all of this?" Lucrute asked while gazing at Mom. "By the gods, I hope not. Seems like things are already hectic enough as it is," I replied. Lucrute patted my head after I said this. "Change isn't always a bad thing, Nina. We've dealt with a lot of changes in over a month. And, based on my own personal opinion, those changes have been pretty good." Lucrute reasoned in an easygoing tone. He wasn't wrong, and that response helped to push my doubts further to the back of my mind. "You're right. Mom will wake up better than ever soon enough," I said optimistically. "I hope." "That's the spirit," the blonde archer said positively before pulling out my spell tome and placing it in my lap. "Now, why not try taking your mind off of Kasha for a bit and try practicing spells? I know that doing target practice tends to take my mind off issues." Looking at the spell tome in my lap, I smiled and nodded. "Maybe I can try mastering the first spell in this tome before Mom wakes up. Try and surprise her. Then I wish you all the best. Magic is nowhere near my strong suit, weird root abilities aside. But I think that you could do it." He then pushed himself out of his chair before adding, "If you've got anything else you want to talk about, all of us are here to lend an ear whenever you want." "I'll remember that. Thanks, Lucrute," I said appreciatively. "You're welcome, Nina, the Emerald Mage." Both of us laughed at the epitaph for a few moments before Lucrute gave me a final nod and left the room. He was probably off to follow his own advice and do some target practicing. Flipping open the tome to the page I had last left off at, I conjured an orb of foxfire. Peter. Behind the magically constructed temple that the foxes, technically kitsune, had created, I busied myself in practicing my swordsmanship. Ever since Kasha had started that training regimen for me, I've made certain to continue following it, even after we stopped diving in that dungeon. Namely, I haven't taken any of the weights I'd been given off during that entire time. Even with the most recent battle included. Aside from strengthening my body, there was also a practical reason for it. The metal weights were surprisingly good as armor. It helped that I was noticing dramatic improvements after each day. Almost supernaturally dramatic improvements. Being an adventurer for a while, I've done my fair share of weight training, but any physical gains I earned took a lot more time than this. One part of me thought that this was due to the proximity I had with Kasha since, before then, such improvements took multiple weeks or months to see. Yet, looking at the ignited blade in my hand, I wasn't entirely certain. Beyond the magical sword just having an amazing cutting ability or the enchanted flame, there also seemed to be more. Whenever I picked it up, I just felt stronger. Perhaps there were further enchantments to this blade than was obvious at first glance? And that didn't even speak of the strange dreams I've been having since acquiring this sword. They weren't nightmares exactly. It was always me appearing before a giant figure, taller than mountains in a land of superheated rock, fire, and magma. His skin was soot-like, with cracks of magma that spread across his entire being. He had a massive beard of fire and lava that covered his face with a pair of eyes made of white flame while irises of blue flame were contained within. Even without being able to fully feel the heat from those eyes, I somehow knew that they were hotter than any other flame I've ever seen. Even Kasha's seemed minor in comparison. In this giant's hands was a massive blade of obsidian, wreathed in flames that started as red near the crossguard of the blade before lightening until they became pure white at the tip. While the sword may have been different in shape and design from my own, it almost felt like my sword had been hewn from the same material of that mountainous blade, if not from the giant sword itself. Yet, even with the colossal being's intimidating appearance, I didn't feel fear before him, nor did he seem hostile to me. The dreams would always start with the giant taking a stance with his blade at the ready, unmoving. The moment my dream avatar's body copied said stance with my own dreamt blade of fire, the giant would perform a strike with his blade and wait for me. If I copied it correctly, the giant would move to another strike and wait. If not, then he would repeat the previous strike until I performed it correctly in his burning eyes. He had never spoken in any of my dreams, yet it seemed like he was becoming used to my presence. Compared to the first dream, it had taken a few minutes of him studying me before entering that first stance. Now, the moment I appeared in the dream before him, he'd immediately ready himself in preparation to teach me. It was the weirdest sword instruction I've ever received since it was all in a dream, yet the skills I learned from it translated to the waking world extremely easily. At first, I believed it was just my subconscious, but thinking more on it, I was coming to the idea that this sword might be alive in a sense. Or perhaps the enchantment of the sword might also include some sort of tutelage for the users. All things said, I didn't have any wish to take this unorthodox training for granted. But when Kasha finally woke up, I'd probably ask her if she might have some knowledge about the sword or had a spell that could inspect it more than normal mages. Until then, I'd take things as it were, and aside from a few stumbles, things were looking great for the Swords of Darkness. And beyond just the team, Helena and I have been getting close. We had a wonderful night prior before this job was taken. I'd like to have more of them, though compared to Kasha and Lucrute, we haven't received as many noise complaints. With a steady breath, I entered the first stance of the fire giants and began practicing the sharp slashing movements. Switching to the second stance, I practiced the multiple guarded blocks against an imagined opponent. Mid-block, I entered the third stance and parried away the strikes before following after with swift counterstrikes of my blade, my crossguard, and my pommel. Changing to the fourth stance, I made heavy attacks that would batter an opponent's defenses. This left them open to the fifth stance, utilizing both blade and body. I kicked at the legs of my opponent as their guard broke. Off-balanced, I performed a quick jab with my elbow at their face and brought my sword down near the crook of my opponent's neck where their armor would be most vulnerable. Taking another deep breath, I pulled myself back into my first stance. These stances, while fitting for my weapon, still felt incomplete. There was likely more that I hadn't been shown yet, but until the fire giant showed me further, I'd need to practice with what I have now. In a way, I found it a little humorous that, with all this swordplay that I was being taught, I still had no idea what the fire giant was called. Unless he had no name and was only that, a fire giant, Surta. Looking around myself after hearing an ancient voice that sounded like the stone of a mountain scraping against itself, I called out, "Who's there?" All I received in response was silence. Who said that? And what did the word Surta mean? South of Elibera. The massive gathering of mana I sensed yesterday, in combination with the golden pillar that pierced the sky, both intrigued and upset me greatly. Miles away, within my hidden fortress, the power was still palpable from here. Immediately after it had been felt and witnessed, I went to work trying to discover the origin to the mass of power. Annoyingly, some form of magic blocked my sight when I attempted to scry the exact location of the mana's source. Concerning to see that something is able to elude my abilities like this. Yet, it was also intriguing. In that direction is Rantel, a city that my minions had marked for death. I know for a fact that this was not them, for they neither have the ability to perform something of that scale or the mana needed to be so detectable. Even with the Orb of Death in hand, they still didn't have enough power to accomplish this. Yet, something near that city did. And with how close it was to my research base, it told me of two things. The first, that some magical item of great power was discovered by incompetent fools that lacked the ability to control it, leading to the announcement of their presence. The second, that a rival was near my territory and was trying to send out a challenge to those nearby. If I still had flesh, I'd be glaring at the thought. But the second option was the least likely in this situation. Beings of such extraordinary power like myself, the Dragon Lords, other Night Liches, the older vampires, or even the Godkin wouldn't do such a thing since it would attract the attention of too many competitors. The only thing closest in consideration would be the evil deities. I firmly remember how bold they were, flaunting their might and power as they believed none could challenge them. Arrogant fools. Their wanton destruction was immensely vexing as I lost decades of work during one of their rampages that took them through the Airthalia kingdom. Though, the country was gone at this point as it had been absorbed by the Baharuth Empire centuries ago. I couldn't care about the lives lost, besides the massive amount of research and spell materials that had been left behind for me to collect and experiment on. But when my base had been part of the collateral of one of the evil deity's spells, I found myself angered beyond measure, the first time in centuries. But I was weaker then, so all I could do was bide my time and wait. Thankfully, my patience was rewarded as the 13 heroes defeated each of the evil deities, and I made certain to scrounge the remains of those beings or acquire live samples before any others came along with the same idea or the evil deities were fully sealed away. From my experimenting with the remains and samples, along with the incorporation of them unto myself, I could not and would not believe that any like the evil deities or those of my power were prowling the world. Instead, this was obviously the discovery of another one of the god items that had been utilized by the evil deities, the 8 greed kings, and the 6 great gods. A god item that was free for the taking, if these fools were so daft as to lose control of it like this. While it had taken centuries of work, I've only ever acquired one god item in my time. An ancient item with an unknown name uncovered during one of my expeditions at the Northern Seas. From the centuries of studying it, I have come to the understanding of its property to merge the features of one creature on another. With it, I've spent all these centuries slowly enhancing myself, becoming greater than the pathetic human origin I started from, and enhancing the Night Lich form that I've transformed myself into. Looking at the immensely strong and durable insectoid arm of the demon god of insects attached to my shoulder, or the tails of the god dragon and the deceased dragon emperor that swayed behind me, only some of the multiple parts I've grafted to my form. With how powerful the god item I dubbed chimeric evolution had made me, acquiring another would give me strength to rule this world after killing all who could oppose me. I would turn cities into necropolises and raise my armies from them. I'd swarm over the world with my forces, subjugating all those in my wake. I would ascend myself into an undead chimeric god, and then, never again would any dare to stop my studies of magic and reality, but I would need to move fast, as I am not the only witness to this display of power. No doubt that other liches, normal or night, along with the multiple other beings that understood the omission of such power would be coming to claim it as well. Overwhelming force would be required to stop all challengers. My forces can converge on this place within 2 days as they would never tire and had been marginally enhanced like myself. My undead horde, even at its size, can traverse relatively undetected by the inhabitants of this kingdom. Even if they are, such witnesses would be killed and added to my horde. While nowhere close to the maximum number of combatants I could muster, I didn't have time to waste waiting for the nearby members of Xernon to assemble. Instead, I'd acquire the god item from whatever fool was holding it, fight off any would-be thieves that would try to claim my prize, and finally retreat to my hidden fortress and uncover whatever abilities this god item holds. From there, my cultists would be sent the orders to begin their grand necromantic works in any of the cities they currently hid in. It would split the focus of the various authorities from my actual assaults on the unprepared cities, starting with this kingdom. As I know that Khajiit was working on Rantel, I'd take Pespel instead as my starting assault. The large group of cultists hidden in the nobility and governmental positions of Libera would handle that city before we would aim both of our forces at Riestais. After that, it would be easy work taking the rest of the cities for myself. Humorously enough, I'd even welcomed the Baharuth Empire into my newly made undead kingdom. The dead of their armies would make fine troops. After all, the more soldiers they sent me, the greater my armies would swell from their dead. And, once the pathetic empire was weak enough, I would go ahead and take them as well. The only difficulty would come from the slain theocracy, but they could be handled easily enough. As a country, they are already on a war of 3 fronts between the demi-human armies of the south and northeast along with the Elvish kingdom to the east. They'd be straining themselves beyond measure in trying to hold everyone at bay. That's why I already had cultists hidden in their ranks near the front lines. A few lines crumbling because of a newly summoned undead horde in the middle of their armies would break them. None would stop Alon Vicus, leader and future god of Xernon. I would ascend past that of the slain theocracy's god of death into something even grander. And then, when all was said and done, I would have beautiful silence to work in peace. Letting my multiple sets of differing wings carry me from the ground, I flew down hallway of my hidden base towards the enormous room holding my years of work. Within the long and arching room of stone and lead designed to block all attempts at scrying, was the army of the dead standing in formation as the minor vampires and liches under my command inspected each of the rows of undead chimeras that stood at the ready. Each one of my hybrids had an overall base of human corpses, exposed ribcage or rotting flesh excluded. Yet, that was where the similarities stopped. While a human base was the easiest and most malleable to adjust, most parts of it were too weak. As such, my chimeric undead utilized the arms of a troll, generously gifted from a captured troll in the dungeon whose parts we constantly harvested. Their regenerative properties were quite astounding. Even though the arms went down to the shins of my undead's digitigrade legs, they had the use of acting as continually regenerating shields to take attacks for the main body. On note of the legs, I attained them from the corpses of the lizardman tribes at the Great Lake of Tog. The war that they had years prior among one another gave me more material than I could ask for. Enough that I didn't even need to kill more or perform another breeding operation. Speaking of the breeding operation, the tails and wings of my chimeric undead had been acquired from the young frost dragons that I had been breeding in captivity for years now. I don't enjoy the process since it takes so much effort and resources to perform and maintain, but it's better than earning the ire of the entire clan of frost dragons on the Azalisia Mountains. No, breeding them in captivity while harvesting their wings and tails at a young enough age was an easier process. Once at the correct age, most would breed once before being euthanized and harvested. The ones kept alive would act as adult breeding pairs until no longer able, before they were put down as well and harvested. Was this process cruel? I'd believe so, but it was not a cruelty I took pleasure in. Just the most optimal method to acquire the necessary parts needed for my project. This finally left the head, a combination of human, dragon, and orc. Elongated jaws of a dragon on a human skull base with the tusks of an orc added on while a crown of horns completed it. Utilizing the dragon hide and bones, all of my horde were armored in a mixture of the two, giving them a stark white appearance. Even if some would consider it to not be the most efficient design for my chimeric undead, I guess one might say that I have some nostalgia for my humble human origins to have made the main base of my masterpiece a simple human, even if it was upgraded. Lord Alon, your hoard has been readied and inspected. What is your command? Levina, a vampire of less than a century, asked. Levina had a young appearance, just at the beginnings of adulthood. As a habit from her prior experiences under her former master, Levina kept her black hair cut short, while her red eyes, contrasting greatly against her pale skin, looked at me eagerly. She wore dark robes, belted in the center with leather wrap that held a mixture of potions and arcane foci. She had been turned at the age of 17 by her former master who had bought her as a slave. Her master had bought her when she was 12, but waited for her to age before turning her. For the next 20 years following this, he was quite cruel to her, using Levina for his needs in any method he saw fit. This continued until Levina managed to escape him, running through the Baharuth Empire until encountering me by chance at a village I had been forced to liquidate due to hostilities. I'm not certain what it was that made me wish to take her in: scientific curiosity, boredom, a faint remnant of my former humanity? I couldn't say. What I could say, however, was that she's been a remarkable student under my tutelage in necromancy. If all preparations are ready, we leave immediately for the arcane source. We shall fly high to avoid being picked out by any witnesses. Once close enough, we shall fly low to avoid being spotted by any mages that will also arrive and be keeping their eyes on the sky. I answered. Upon concluding this, I reached into my purple robes and pulled out what one might assume to be a large knitting needle of golden metal. At the handle of this needle, it bulged out into an oval shape where numerous creatures, demi-humans, monsters, and more seemed to merge into one another. This was my prized possession, chimeric evolution. I leave the god item in your care until my return. Ensure that this base remains protected while I'm gone. I ordered, though Levina smiled at what most would consider to be a cold and emotionless tone. I will, Master Alon. What do you believe this magic source is to send all of your chimeric undead to accompany you in its acquisition? Levina asked. Potentially, another god item. I will claim it for myself. I answered. Levina looked excited for me and gave a nod. Then, that'll mean that you'll have become even more powerful than you already are. The little vampire summarized, will it allow you to finally enact your plan sooner than predicted? With good fortune, yes, it will, I said before patting Levina's shoulder with my multiple left hands. But until then, keep the base, the god item, and especially yourself safe. I will. I gave a nod at the answer before turning to my army. Come. We have my god item to acquire, I commanded to the army. With synchronized movements, all of my army walked towards me, and I began leading them to the base's hidden entrance. Slain Theocracy. Within the halls of the meeting room of the Theocracy's highest religious authority sat 6 cardinals. Each wore matching robes and ceremonial hats, yet the coloring of each of their robes differed from one another. The table they sat at was a perfect circle, made to symbolize how none at the table had more power than the other. This report is deeply concerning. A woman in red robes remarked with a face full of thought. She had chin-length brunette hair that lacked the signs of age her plump face did. She was Cardinal Bernice. Indeed, it is. That is why we need to act fast, lest this falsehood continues to spread and that origin of mana be acquired before we can take it. Cardinal Zinedine, a shriveled and skeletal old man with cunning eyes and shoulder-length grey hair wearing blue robes spoke. It is bad enough that this falsehood of a new goddess has started taking over Rantle, but we all witnessed the pillar of golden light from even here. I've no doubt that it's a power of the 6 great gods that could possibly be stolen by the heretics in Rantle. We're all in agreement that it is an item of the 6 great gods? Yvonne, a man in yellow robes with short blonde hair wearing a monocle over his left eye asked. A fist slammed the table as Dominic, an elderly man in green robes with grey hair, had an enraged look upon his face. Of course it's an item of the 6. None of the 6 would ever bother to appear near a city of heretics compared to a city of their most devout. The fact that such an item is close enough to a city where heretics can snatch it with their unworthy hands is sacrilege, he shouted before he seemed to rein in his anger. I understand your frustration, Dominic, but we must keep a level head in a situation like this. Raymond, a bearded man with short brown hair and a lighter brown robe, reasoned. Of the cardinals in the room, he was the youngest of them. Zinedine, of your agents within or nearby Rantel, would any be able to investigate and possibly obtain this item or knowledge of it at a quick rate? We have two methods to do so. The first one is that we can contact our agents through the message spell and likely reach them within the day. The risk that comes from it is the potential failure or interception of the message. The secondary option is to send a squad of infiltrators, possibly even a few members of Black Scripture in a joint operation, over the mountains with the fly spell. It does risk noticeability, but such an operation needs to be done at all haste. Zinedine answered, earning a nod from the cardinals as they considered the answer. If this is the case, then might I offer Quaes to aid in this mission? Maximilian asked. He was an older man with straight black hair that went to his chin, matching moustache and goatee, and glasses. His robes were black, and he displayed a talent for magic due to the book next to him being levitated by it. He has a good track record, can handle large groups on his own since this will be a small infiltration team, and is close enough to the border to be quickly picked up for transport. That would be acceptable. Zinedine replied. We'll have just enough time to send our infiltration unit to the location within 2 days' time, possibly less. Our trackers should also be able to locate the magic item if it were to have been taken and moved before they get there. Excellent. Raymond complimented with a smile. Within short order, we'll soon have another one of the Six's godly items in our grasp. Perhaps it could even aid us in repelling the demi-humans. With faith in the Six, it will be, Dominic concluded.